You remember March 2020. Everyone does. The world stopped. Lockdowns began. Everything changed overnight. You stayed home. Weeks turned into months. And when you finally emerged, when you stepped back into the world, something felt wrong. Not just different, wrong. Your favorite coffee shop looked the same, but the light inside felt off. Your best friend still had the same laugh, but there was something in their eyes you didn't recognize. The route you'd driven 1,000 times suddenly felt unfamiliar, like you were seeing it for the first time through someone else's memories. You told yourself it was trauma, adjustment, the psychological aftermath of a global crisis. Everyone felt weird, so your weird was normal, right? But here's what you haven't considered. What if the disorientation you felt wasn't psychological? What if when you went into lockdown in March 2020, you entered one world, and when you came out, you emerged into another? What if the pandemic wasn't the disaster? What if it was the cover story for something far stranger? This isn't about conspiracy theories or political agendas. This is about something that happened to all of us, something we felt but couldn't name. The sense that we didn't just lose time in 2020, we lost continuity. We lost the thread of our own reality. And when we picked it back up, we were holding someone else's thread. Let's start with what you know to be true, what you felt, because that's real, regardless of explanation. You emerged from lockdown and nothing felt quite right anymore. Your house, the place you'd been trapped in for months, suddenly felt less like home. The neighborhood you'd lived in for years seemed subtly rearranged, though you couldn't point to what had moved. Your own reflection in the mirror looked like you, but sometimes you'd catch yourself staring, trying to recognize the person looking back. Your relationships changed, not in the obvious ways. Yes, people were stressed, traumatized, politically divided, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the subtle shift in how people felt. Your mother's voice on the phone, familiar but somehow slightly wrong, like an actor doing a nearly perfect impression. Your partner's habits that seemed new, even though they insisted they'd always done things that way. Friends who remembered shared experiences completely differently than you did. You chalked it up to isolation, to the stress of the pandemic, to the way trauma rewrites memory. And maybe that's all it is, but maybe it's not. Think about your own memories from before 2020. Really think about them. They feel distant, don't they? Not just in time, but in quality. Like watching a movie of someone else's life. The emotions are there, but they're muted. Like you're remembering a dream rather than something you actually lived through. You can recall facts, where you worked, where you lived, what you did. But the texture of those memories, the feeling of actually being there, has faded in a way that doesn't match the amount of time that's passed. 2019 feels more distant than it should. 2018 feels like ancient history. Everything before 2020 has this sepia-toned quality, like old photographs that weren't old yet. And when you try to hold on to specific memories, really examine them, they slip away. Details blur. You can't quite picture your old office as clearly as you should. You can't remember your daily routine with the precision you'd expect. It's like trying to remember someone else's life story that you were told once, long ago. This is what people don't talk about, this collective amnesia, this shared sense that our pre-2020 lives belong to different people. We were all so focused on surviving the pandemic, on adapting to the new normal, that we didn't notice we'd lost something fundamental. We didn't notice that our continuity of self had been severed. You went into your house in March 2020 as one person, living one life, in one world, and you came out as someone slightly different, with slightly different memories, into a world that looks the same, but isn't. Now let's talk about what changed. Not the obvious things, like masks and social distancing. I mean the subtle shifts. The details that don't quite add up. Brands you've known your entire life suddenly look different. Their logos have changed. Their slogans are off. Their packaging seems wrong. When you mention it, people tell you the logo has always looked that way. You search online and find no record of the version you remember, but you know what you saw. You remember it clearly. So clearly that the new version feels like a mistake, like someone replaced the real one with a knockoff. Celebrities look different, not aged, though time passed. Different. Their faces have subtly shifted. Features you remember clearly have changed. You show someone a recent photo and say, "Doesn't their face look different?" And they look at you like you're crazy. But you see it. The proportions are wrong. The angles don't match your memory. Places have changed too. The geography of your own city feels off. Buildings you swear were on the left are now on the right. That park you used to visit has trees in different configurations. The drive to work takes a different amount of time, even though traffic patterns are similar. You keep getting turned around in places you've known for years, not because you forgot, but because they're not quite where they should be. And then there are the bigger things. Historical events you remember differently. Movies you recall releasing in specific years that apparently came out in other years. Songs with lyrics that have changed. Books with titles that aren't quite right. The Mandela effect, people call it, dismissing it as false memory. But what if it's not false memory? What if we're remembering correctly from a world that doesn't exist anymore? Because here's the thing, when 2020 happened, when we all went inside, when the world stopped, we lost our reference points. We lost our daily confirmation of reality. For months, we were isolated, experiencing the world through screens, through media, through filtered information. We weren't out in the world, touching it, confirming its existence with our senses. And when we came back out, what we found was a recreation. A copy, nearly perfect, but not quite. Like a stage set that looks real from a distance, but reveals its artificiality up close. The world we knew ended sometime during those lockdown months, and what replaced it was something else. Something almost identical. Almost. The pandemic was the perfect cover. Everyone was traumatized, disoriented, grieving. If things felt off, well, of course they did. The world had just been through a crisis. No one questioned their disorientation because everyone was disoriented. The replacement happened in plain sight. And we were all too distracted to notice. You've noticed how time feels different now, haven't you? Days blur together, weeks vanish, months compress. You look at the calendar and you're shocked by what date it is, how much time has passed, because it doesn't feel like it's been that long. People say time flies as you get older, but this is different. This is temporal disorientation. Hours feel simultaneously too long and too short. The weekend arrives and you can't believe it's already here. Then it's Monday again and you can't remember what you did over the weekend. Time has become elastic, unreliable, dreamlike, and nostalgia hits differently now. When you think about pre-2020 life, the longing is profound, almost painful, not just missing simpler times, but missing a world that felt more real, more solid, more present. There's a homesickness in it, not for a place, but for a reality, for a version of existence where things made sense, where your memories felt concrete, where you felt like you were actually living rather than watching yourself live. Dreams have changed too. Many people report having more vivid dreams since 2020, or stranger dreams. Dreams where the world is subtly wrong, where familiar places are rearranged, where people you know act like strangers. You wake up disoriented, unsure for a moment which world is real, the dream or the waking life. And sometimes the dream feels more authentic than the reality you return to. This is what happens when consciousness exists in a world it doesn't quite fit into. Your subconscious mind knows something is wrong, even if your conscious mind has rationalized it away. So it processes the discontinuity through dreams, through that persistent sense of displacement, through the feeling that you're not quite present in your own life. People describe feeling like they're watching their life happen rather than living it, like they're a character in someone else's story, like there's a glass wall between them and genuine experience. Therapists call this depersonalization, derealization, symptoms of trauma and anxiety. And maybe that's all it is. But what if it's not a symptom? What if it's an accurate perception? What if you really are watching rather than living because this isn't your life to live? This is someone else's life, someone who looks like you, sounds like you, has your memories but isn't quite you, and you're just along for the ride, a passenger in your own body, living in a world that was built for someone else. The hardest part isn't the changed logos or the weird sense of time. It's the people you love. Because they changed too. Not dramatically. They still love you. They still know your history together. They still have the same personalities. Mostly. But there are differences. Small ones. Subtle ones. Ones you can't quite articulate but you feel in your bones. Your spouse tells a story about how you met, and the details are slightly off. Not enough to argue about, but enough to make you uncertain. Did it happen their way? Your way? Why don't you remember it the same anymore? Your childhood friend brings up a shared memory that you don't have. You laugh it off, blame it on time and age. But privately you're disturbed. How can they remember something so vividly that you have no recollection of? And worse, how can you remember things they insist never happened? Your parents seem older in ways that don't match the amount of time that's passed. Not just physically aged, but older in their essence. Like they've lived more years than the calendar suggests. Or maybe you're the one who's different, who sees them through eyes that aren't quite your own. Here's the disturbing question that keeps you awake sometimes. If you were replaced, were they replaced too? Are these the same people you knew before 2020? Or are they versions from this timeline? Do they notice you're different? Just as you notice they're different? Or are they perfect fits for this world and you're the only one who doesn't belong? Maybe everyone was replaced. Maybe we all crossed over together into this parallel world, bringing our memories with us, and none of us are having exactly the same experience because we all came from slightly different origin points. We're all refugees from different versions of 2019, now trying to coexist in this single shared 2024. Or maybe most people are native to this timeline, and only some of us crossed over, the ones who feel this persistent wrongness. The ones who can't shake the sense that they don't belong. The ones who remember the world being different. We're the anomalies, the glitches. Consciousness from another world, trapped in bodies that belong here, surrounded by people who fit perfectly, because this is their world. And we can never tell them. We can never explain how they feel subtly wrong to us, because how do you say that without sounding insane? How do you tell someone you love that they're... The pandemic was real. People suffered. People died. The grief is genuine. The trauma is valid. I'm not questioning that. But what if the pandemic served another purpose? What if it was the perfect cover for something that would otherwise be impossible to hide? Think about what lockdown accomplished. It isolated us. It removed us from our normal reference points. It made us dependent on screens and media for our understanding of reality. It severed our daily confirmation of what was real. For months, we weren't out in the world, touching it, verifying it with our senses. We were alone, consuming information, trusting what we were told. And during that isolation, something happened. A shift, a replacement, a crossing over from one timeline to another. It happened gradually, so gradually that we didn't notice. Each day slightly different from the last, but the changes so incremental that we adapted without realizing we were adapting to a different world altogether. When we finally came out, enough time had passed that we doubted our own memories. We'd been isolated so long that we weren't sure what things were supposed to look like anymore. And everyone else was just as disoriented, so there was no stable reference point. We all just accepted that this was the world now, the post-pandemic world, changed by crisis. We never questioned whether it was the same world at all. The perfect crime, the perfect replacement. Hide a cosmic shift inside a global crisis. Who would notice? Who would believe it if they did? So now you know, or at least now you've heard it articulated, the thing you felt but couldn't name, the wrongness, the displacement, the sense that you're living in a copy of your life rather than the original. And now you have to decide what to do with this awareness. Some people will dismiss it. They'll rationalize it away. Trauma, stress, false memory, psychological effects of isolation. That's easier than accepting that the world you knew is gone. That's safer than acknowledging that you might be a stranger in your own life. Others will become obsessed with it. They'll search for proof, catalogue inconsistencies, try to find a way back to the original timeline. They'll drive themselves toward madness, chasing evidence of a world that doesn't exist anymore, trying to convince others who will never believe them. But maybe there's another way. Maybe you just live with it. You acknowledge that something changed, something fundamental, but you continue anyway. You love the people in your life. Even if they're not quite the ones you remember, you engage with this world, even if it's not quite your world. You exist here because here is all you have. The truth is, you'll never know for certain. You'll never have proof. This theory, this explanation for your displacement, is unfalsifiable. It fits your experience perfectly, but that doesn't make it true. It could all be in your head. The world might be exactly what it appears to be, and your sense of wrongness might be purely psychological. But I want you to sit with a question. Just sit with it. Don't answer it. Just let it exist in your mind. When you look in the mirror tomorrow morning, when you see your reflection looking back at you, ask yourself, is that really you? Is that the same person who went to sleep in March 2020? Or is it someone else? Someone who looks like you, who has your memories, who's living your life? Are you the original? Or are you the replacement? Did the world change in 2020? Or were you changed? Did we all cross over into a new timeline? Or did the timeline continue without us, while something else took our place? You went inside in March 2020. That much is certain. But the person who came back out, the person experiencing this strange, slightly wrong world, the person questioning their own continuity of existence, are you sure that's you? Welcome to the replacement.